I guess it's split in the middle. Anyway, you have 52 words, and these 52 words are all written one after the other without any punctuation. The delineation of the verses is part of the oral tradition. One reason for this may be that since all the existence is created in the same moment, there's no separation in the Torah. It's all like one creation. Yet the space that people occupy is split. Since all creation is created in the same moment, the actual sequence of the sentences is irrelevant from that perspective. It's difficult for a person to comprehend everything created in the same moment. In fact, there's no time there, it's just created in the same thought. So in a certain sense, in your mind, there is no time. There's a time in the physical presence, but there's a part of mind that goes before and beyond time as well. It's a difficult concept, though, sometimes to understand. However, it allows for the understanding that verse number 6 follows verse number 2 just as easily as it follows verse 5, because it's coming from different words at different points in the creation. And we have a similar idea of the development of understanding Torah. It says that Bayer Esater Hazes, that Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of the 4 days he was explaining, he explained this Torah. And so the Torah was explained in the way of Baer. Baer is a well, and those who connected just took out from the well of Torah. It was a constant flow of surge of life force. But later on, after the destruction of the first temple and the start of the second, people couldn't connect to that well the same way they were able to in previous generations. And so the way the Torah was taught became different. It was more intellectualized, it was more analytical. It changed because people couldn't connect in the same way. And in a similar vein, the writing of the Torah, the way the words were written, was also different. They were not as formal as we have it now. There were words, but they didn't have as many details as we have now. Ezra set up the way we write the letters because people needed a system. Beforehand, it was more vague. The way the old Hebrew was much more vague than it is now, but they didn't need it. They didn't need the details like we need them later or now. So that's why it changed at that point when they built the second temple through Ezra. But that's an interesting topic of its own, how that developed. But it actually just reflects a different way in connecting to Torah. Expressed softly, the word uttered might be a good replacement and is softer than the word said, but it doesn't hold the power and wholeness of expressed softly. Especially as that we're not talking about gutturals here. The verse is not talking about a mouth. The speech is in thought, so the word uttered wouldn't be proper even though it's soft. Strengthen, the words hold more of the power of expression rather than the softness. It's the force that comes with the word yihi. Yihi comes out with a force. It's just a yud and a hey and a yud. It seems just should be something soft, but it has a very powerful force with it. Expansive filter. The word sponge could also be used, but it can't be used because then it's not a constant flow. A sponge holds it and then you squeeze it out. Here it's a constant flow, so it doesn't have that same connotation. What becomes? There are a few differences between the word yihi and vihi. One major difference is the letter that each word begins with. The main life force or energy of a word is in the first letter, and the following letters are expressions from that point of the first letter. Strength, or yihi, has the letter yud as the first letter. The yud is a point that represents the creator. What becomes, or vihi, has the letter vav as the first letter, representing that it's drawn down from some point. So it's a little bit different than just a yud. The vowels and dots also vary. Yihi has one dot on top of the other, almost as a stopping point, while Vihi has a single dot, and this is a new starting point for further details and creations. So the dots, which are the Nakudas, also tell you about what's happening here. Distinguishes, there are many aspects to this word. Simply Mavdil is numerically 86, which is the same as Elokim, only now the boundaries are more tangible. Elokim is what initially sets up the boundaries for all creation, the possibility for distinguishing things, and so Elokim is used in a general sense and also in the details of what is established. Within surge a surge, which would seem impossible, yet as it exists in the thought of the Creator, it doesn't take up any space. So while we can understand surges in the ocean, we can understand different levels of the time of what goes on, how the water flows. In the thought of the Creator, it's all in one thought happening in the same space. Just a few additional commentaries on it. We don't find an action word creating surge, as we find it created this or that was created. It just happens to be the word ma'im is there. This is because it's a natural element, the wisdom and knowledge of all creation. It's a natural element, like when the energy of a person is what they exude. A person is positive, you can feel positive energy from them. If they're negative, you can feel negative. If they're dead, you feel lack of that energy. If they're alive, you feel certain energy. A person, the action of a person also creates the energy that surrounds a person. So some people can see that energy or feel it, others can't, but it's there. And that's why the best way of teaching people is by self-example, because you create that energy. When you create that energy, other people will pick it up. It may be subliminal, it may be on a non-conscious level, but it's there. And here we find a deeper, higher level of wisdom being separated from a lower level of wisdom understanding, higher and lower in many different ways. This is because mankind uses knowledge for its own selfish purposes. So that it had to be separated so it doesn't destroy all creation, it only destroys the space that human beings are going to be in, because they're going to destroy whatever they have. So if all the forces of creation were open to human beings, they'd be destructive in everything, which is what we find in generations before Noah. They abused all the powers in nature and destroyed the earth. If they would have had more powers, they would have destroyed more. So therefore there had to be a separation, so what they destroy is limited to one part of the creation. Knowing that what people would do would happen is a causative factor for concealing the higher knowledge and wisdom of creation. Which is why they say you can only teach it. It was only given over to people who would know exactly how to use it properly or how not to use it. And what it says, when the world will be restored to its full balance with Mashiach, then everyone will be able to be open to that knowledge which was hidden from mankind till now. This information was concealed in the Torah, and so when one studies the Torah, you can find a lot of things that normally you won't read or learn, as we've brought up a few things through the classes. This is the reason why the Torah was taught to people on a very physical level for the last few thousand years, because they didn't want people to get too far beyond it and get off balance. Now that we're coming closer to the time where it can be revealed, so it's being opened and revealed to people. And that's why we're giving these classes. The Rakia is also has the word meaning of ice. In Cheskel, Ezekiel, chapter 1, 22. And just as ice is the same as water, only hardened, so too the rakia is the same element as mayim, only hardened. The word for ice is kerach, which is the same letters as chorak, which means to grind, make an incision or notch. Thus, these letters cause a separation that is occurring. They reflect the movement of the letters, and the name of the word reflects whatever is happening. These two or various elements of the surge of wisdom called mayim are part of the essence of wisdom from before this creation. Only it has no self-expression until this existence is brought forth. An example can be gleaned from the sun. We benefit from the rays of the sun, yet the sun has no benefit from the rays, just that they emanate from the sun. And within the sun there are no rays either, yet it's the source of all the light and healing that we receive. And the sun is shining 24 hours all the time. The sun has no concept of day or night either. That's something we perceive, we've created, but the sun, it's shining all the time. There's no 24 hours, there's no year. It doesn't have the cycle that we've created to make time, to describe time anyway. The word or, mayim, and rakia are all non-tangible elements. It's only that these things take on a physical form, and so we have a relationship from the physical to know that these ideas exist. The word omar, to say, is an acronym. The word aleph is or, mem is mayim, and rakia is the firmament or the strength, the filter. So vayomer, the idea of Amira saying, also has these things in the word amar. Any questions? Okay.
What happens to all this energy that's stirred up?
What happened to all the energy that was stirred up? Which energy are you talking about?
We talked about last week, you have surges of energy within a framework, the vortex within the framework. So what happens?
The framework of energy, once we go through the different stages, then we'll see where this energy is. Here it's still in a formation space, so we're not at that point to go into that description. But we'll get to it. Yeah.
When they say the waters, are they actually talking about water?
No, we've already spoken about that before, that there is no water. So to say water on a spiritual level is actually a lie, because water doesn't exist there. So we brought the story of Rabbi Akiva. We mentioned it when we spoke about water, that there is no water. It may look like water, it may have a picture, but there's no actual water. The word water here refers to the flow that's happening, the surge of energy, the surge of life force.
So everything was, when you say energy, you mean like a current? Like, when you say energy, how would you describe the energy?
How would you describe an energy that you cannot see?
It's
How do you
it's a force, like electricity, so to speak.
Like electricity. How do you describe something that has no description to you?
Well,
Have you ever tried to describe something to someone who's never seen it? How would you describe the earth to someone who's never been on earth? People, in order for people to imagine something, they have to have a relationship to it. I use words in a general sense, but it's not something I say, this is what it looks like. Okay, so I'll give a little story about imagination and the idea of someone wanting something. And sometimes when you get what you want, what happens? And so one has to be careful. And one of the things that people have always wanted is to know all the spiritual things and be able to see it and come to those places and have eternal life as well is another issue. It's part of the whole thing, because in this place it's a constant flow of life. It's like an eternal life. You don't have the concept of death. In this physical place you have the concept of death and you have time. So here you have death and time. There you have, if you're in a space, you're in that space forever. There's no change. That's a different problem of its own, which is why if you're stuck in a certain space here and you go and you leave this earth and you see lights and whatever it appears like a heaven to you, it's only the level of your perception where you're in, and you're limited to that. It's heaven to you, but you're limited to that because that's as far as your consciousness allows you to be. There are worlds out of it, but you don't see it. So in the spiritual world, you don't have that growth that you have in the physical. In the physical, you can grow and expand. Outside of the realm of, you can have new experiences. In the spiritual, you don't have that. You are what you are, and that's it. So every place has its positive and the other side as well. So here's just an interesting story. It's a story which is told of a king who was a very wise, understanding king, and did everything a king could wish for. One day, a thought started gnawing at him, bothering him. And he was wondering, he'd heard that there's water somewhere, that if a person drinks that water, they live forever. So he started wondering, if such a thing exists, how can I get hold of such a thing? And who would be better than myself to drink such water? If someone is going to live forever, I'm the perfect person. Everyone loves me. I'm an understanding king. I'm a benevolent king. I'm a good king. And so if there's such a thing, I'm the person that deserves to drink from the water fountain that you can live forever. So the king started asking people, psychics and channelers and people that see energy and see things, if anyone knows where it is. And no one seemed to know. And one day a person who can tell the future came to the king, and the king asked this person for help. And the person said, give me 15 days, I'll research it, and I'll tell you what I can find out. At the end of 15 days, this person returned, future teller returned to the king.
You're a fortune teller?
Future, not fortune teller. The person who could see the future.
Prophet, right?
Seeing the future doesn't mean you're a prophet. Seeing the future means you see the future. It does not mean you're a prophet. Ability of perception doesn't make you a prophet.
Some people are profit from that.
Many people profit from it nowadays because people want to believe that there are people are prophets and can see things that are beyond them, but it's a person who can see things. We have intuition. Sometimes there are people who have feelings of what's going to be. Sometimes people have vision. Sometimes people have understanding. A wise person can see what the end result of things is going to be. There are different ways of seeing futures. But none of that makes you a prophet. The prophet doesn't have to see the future. A prophet is someone who channels what the Creator wants and tells you what the Creator wants you to know, whether you like it or not. There's nothing to do with what the person understands or not. Okay. Anyway, so this person said the following, that I found out that there's a country very far away which there is such type of water, and the king, if the king wants to go there, the king would have to take a big boat and fill it up for a long journey, and on the journey take the strongest of men with you, of course, and after 7 days of traveling south, there would be a big island, and sail to the east of the island, and when you go around, you'll see a group of mountains, and go to the top of one of the mountains, and from there you'll look and you'll see down a group of smaller mountains in a circle, like a ring, and in the middle, at the bottom of those, in the middle of those mountains, there's a stream of water. And when you see the water, you'll know that you've reached your destination. Well, the king, of course, took with him 50 strong men, warriors, and filled up the boat. And they left the city. Everyone came to watch him go, not knowing what's going to happen on this journey. On the journey, obviously, some of the king's warriors who had not been on boats became seasick, which happens. But as the days continued, 3, 4, they didn't know, they're in the middle of the ocean, didn't know if they could actually find or not find anything. Suddenly, at the end of the 6th day, the lookout called land aho, he saw land. And so they were very happy that the land was seen. They rejoiced. But it was late, and so the next day, they came close to the land and they were able to land on dry, come to dry land. And so they left 10 sailors, 10 people at the ship, and the rest took the journey. And they hiked for a day. They came to the foot of the mountain. They camped for the night, and they started climbing the mountain the next morning. And they were hiking for a day, and it became dark again. They hadn't reached the top, and so they set up camp again. Of course, they don't know what type of animals and noise are there, so they took turns sleeping and staying awake. And the next day they continued to the top of the mountain. When they reached the top, they saw a beautiful sight. The king saw a valley in the middle of these mountains that were like in a circle, and he could see there was water there. And so they knew that they'd reached their destination. But they were tired, and so they went to sleep again. The next morning, they eagerly sat down to go down the mountain. And of course, these are mountains without paths, so it's a bit slower. And what the person had told them is that it's not enough just coming to the water. You have to go to the place that the water comes out of the earth, where it's a spring coming out of the ground. Because the water only has its power where it comes out of the ground. Once it moves away from there, it doesn't have the same power anymore. Anyway, so they came night again, they camped, had a peaceful night, they continued their way, and after a number of hours they came to the right spot. And the king commanded that no one should come close to the spot where the water comes out, only the king himself will go there. And the king carried a pitcher, went down, filled water, and as the king is about to drink, the king hears a noise. And a voice says, "Are you a king?" Looks around, there's no one there. But a voice says, "Don't drink until you've heard what I have to say." The soldiers heard a voice, but didn't see anyone, didn't know where it came from. Again the voice said, "Come close to me." Even though no one could see, the king started moving to try and go closer to where the voice came from. And as the king came closer, the earth started rising, like an earth body started coming out of the earth. The person had looked like the earth, but now it was rising out. And as the person got up and shaking off the dirt, you could see it was a very old man. And again he said, "Are you a king?" And the king said, "Yes." And the earth person said, "Hold the jug and don't drink till I tell you my story. Then you can decide if you'll drink the waters just as I did when I was a king. I've been waiting for you for over 1,000 years, although I really don't know much about time, but it feels like that anyway. I was once a mighty king, and everyone loved me. One day I was looking at my wealth and grandeur and how people would worship me, and I felt proud and wanted to live forever. Without going into the details, I started to look for someone who knew about such a thing, and eventually someone was brought to me that told me about these waters. I paid well, and he said to me, if you drink, after you drink, you'll want to die. Nothing will help you. You won't be able to die. Even if they cut you into pieces, you won't die. you'll just be in pain. One thing can save you is if you come back to this place and you wait for another person who comes to drink. And you have to ask the person if they're a king and tell them what you went through. If the king regrets his desire to live and pours the water on top of you, then you will die. Otherwise you won't die. Well, I did everything and I came back here and drank the water. I came back home, I was happy and joyful, and 20 years went by and everything was fine. But then all my friends started dying and I was getting older. And I saw that the younger generation were changing the way they speak, were changing the way they eat, were changing their clothes, they were changing everything, and I didn't like it. And I was happy with the clothes that I have, the way I always dressed, and they kept thinking I was outdated. And the older I got, the more outdated I was, unless they related, and they would just make fun of me because I was just not relating to any of them. Anyway, so it caused a lot of strife between myself and the people. They thought I was crazy, I thought they were crazy, and I was the one who was crazy. So I cursed the day that I drank the waters, because I couldn't do anything. I wanted to die, but I couldn't. One day I decided to go for a walk, and I ended up spending many months getting lost in the mountains. And my hair grew long, and I was filthy, and I looked more like an animal than a person. And one day there were hunters going, they thought they saw an animal, and they shot arrows at me, and I fell down. And they came with the knives to cut me up. And one of them noticed that it actually looks like a person. Must be the crazy king. So they took me back, and I was, of course, in a lot of pain. And they put me back together, but that affected me forever. Finally, I remembered what the person told me if I go back to the place. So I told everyone what I'm doing, and I asked the group to accompany me back to this place here so I can wait here for someone else to come. And that's how I left the country. And I'm waiting. And so now it's up to you to choose what you want to do. So the other king that had just come didn't hesitate, and he said, it's a good thing it happened to you and not to me. Now that I heard your story, I do regret it, and I'll pour the water over you. And poured the water over the old king, and the old king disintegrated, and there were just bones left. And the king returned happily. They didn't fall in the trap of his desires. So, there are many lessons in the story. One is that every generation has its leaders and people. And there are those who make a connection from one generation to another. And the things that apply in one generation don't apply in another. And there are things that people want to achieve, but they don't understand what will happen when they achieve it. You know how they say that every person has their issues and problems, and if they exchange their problems with another person's problems, they want their problems back. Very often we don't appreciate what we have. And this is very important. We're trying to understand things that are beyond us, things in another place. So the Torah gives us some understanding of creation. The reason is in order to apply it to our life in some way. So we've been going through the verses, trying to understand it in different ways and learn how it does apply to daily life. Creation didn't just happen a long time ago, it's happening all the time. And so as we finish verse 6, this is, I think, a lesson we can come from, that while the actual energy of the creation is a very powerful force beyond our imagination, at the same time, the creation that happens within our life is not beyond our imagination, it's within our grasp, but it comes from a place beyond we can comprehend. And that's why there are things in life we don't comprehend. We understand to a point and not beyond that point. And every person to a different point. So for today we'll just leave it at there. Yes?
But the Creator knows.
The Creator knows every detail of everything from beginning to end. Yes.
Thank God.
Thank God. Yes.
So He knows what's going on in Syria now.
He knows what's going on everywhere.